now like to introduce our speaker for the evening. Mr. Dalmia is a member of a leading industrial family in India, with substantial interests mostly in India, UK and USA. The Dalmia Group has interests in cement, industrial ceramics, chemicals, real estate, information technology, investments, engineering, trading. He is the chairman of the Dalmia Group Holdings, a holding company for business and financial assets. It invests in private equity, real estate, public markets, structured debt and fixed income. He is an early investor in and a board member of the True North, a leading North India private equity fund, which manages approximately $3.5 billion. He co-founded GTI, a long-term investment vehicle for India-focused investments. He is also the founder and chairman of Landmark Holdings, a real estate investment firm. He is a board member of Brookings India and a member of the governing board of the Institute of New Economic Thinking in New York. He is chairman of the Indian Advisory Board of Room to Read, a global education charity. He is op-ed contributor to the Economic Times, the Times of India and Financial Times. He was selected as a global leader for tomorrow by the World Economic Forum in 2000. Gaurav received an MBA with Beta Gamma Honors, Sigma Honors from Columbia Business School. Can I please have Mr. Dalmia on stage, please? Can I also request Mr. Saurabh Kakkar to felicitate Mr. Dalmia on behalf of the chapter. Mr. Saurabh Kakkar. I'd like to add that I know Mr. Dalmia very, very well personally for many years, and I have learned immensely from him. I probably started my career learning from him, and there's immense learning that I have from him.
How do I link this? So good evening. What I had planned for today is I'll take you through what I call a cartoon show. A bunch of thoughts reflected perhaps sometimes better with humor and cartoons and images than in plain words. Now, I've drawn upon this from a letter I wrote to my daughter 10 years ago. When she was 18 years old, she was going off to university in the US. And I suppose I had nothing better to do, so I wrote her a 4-page letter. And I've drawn this from that letter. And these are lessons I've learned in the course of business. And the important theme is, as we go out to conquer the world in our various businesses and in our various ways, conquering yourself is perhaps the most important and critical factor that then in turn enables us to do great things outside. So the theme would be that. Regina Brett at the age of 90 said, "Life isn't fair, but it's still good." So we sometimes get disappointed when we don't see perfection around us. But I think the lesson I've learned is we have to be used to imperfection. We'll be imperfect. We can criticize our economy, but we can celebrate our economy. It's an imperfect but good economy. We can criticize our spouse. My wife does that a lot. We may have an imperfect spouse, but we may have a great spouse. We may criticize the constraints in our businesses, and again, it may be an imperfect world of business, but it may be a great business, and so on and so forth. So I think the more we go through life, we realize there's this opportunity in imperfection. Now, the first theme I want to talk about is life is your servant, not the other way around. We sometimes get trapped into things that we inherit and into our legacies. And the first thought I want to put forward is we do not be trapped with our legacies. So somebody said, love what you do, do what you love, and deliver more than you promise. Right? That's an important part to succeed no matter what you do. If you want to be a doctor, but somehow end up being in a business, you'll probably not do well because that's not your calling. If you wanted to do a marketing-oriented business and you end up in a commodity-oriented business, you probably won't do well, but that's not your calling, and so on and so forth. We realize that at an intellectual level, but at a practical level, we tend to make compromises, right? And we don't necessarily always do what we love. So here's a cartoon, kid asking mother, I know how I was born, he knows the facts of life, but he wants to know why. So we've got to discover, perhaps in our 20s, what we truly want to do. I don't think as a kid we would know what we want to do, but over time we realize, and we have to mold our life to that calling. Now, one important thing is, here's a bird saying, I don't sing because I'm happy. I'm happy because I sing. So you won't be successful, you won't be happy because you're successful. You'll be successful because you're happy. Because you're happy, you will work harder. Because you're happy, you will build a better team. Because you're happy, 10 other byproducts will happen. And that is what will make you successful. So because you are happy, you will think better. This is one of the most profound statements said by Jawaharlal Nehru. Life is like a game of cards. The hand that is dealt to you represents determinism. But the way we all play it is free will. We tend to overemphasize the deterministic aspects of our lives, and we tend to underemphasize the free will aspects of our lives. Entrepreneurs have shown time and time again they can use free will to break the deterministic elements of the business, which is why the league tables keep changing. If you look at the business league tables, which is why you have disruption. A new incumbent comes and breaks a market leader, and so on and so forth. So this is applicable not just to a society, but to our individual lives, to our businesses. Now, we all want to travel first class, and we should. This cartoon says the flight time today is 5 hours in first class and 12 and a half hours in coach. So we should learn to travel first class. And I use the word first class as a metaphor. We have to learn to live life in a comfortable and happy way. Right? And that's in our mind. It's not literally the first class provided by an aircraft. It's internal. And if we travel our lives first class, we will enjoy it more, the time will pass quickly, and so on and so forth. Here's a cartoon which shows about choice and how we have to always make choices. So Jeff Bezos made a very important statement, saying, please focus on your choices more than you focus on your gifts. Our gifts are what? Intelligence, a business we inherit, the time we are born, the society we are in. These are gifts given to us. We don't control these. Superimposed on these are the choices that we make, which actually determine where we end up. Okay. And Bezos always says that your choices are far more important than the gifts that you have. Theme number 2, and I wrote this in my daughter's book when she was born. You know, when she was 4 days old, everybody writes those cute things in those books. So I actually wrote this. I said, please be versatile. To me, this is the single most important character trait. Now you have an army general here with a Swiss army knife with many badges. We call it Swiss army general. He has many traits. He's able to succeed because he's able to do many different things. Here's a cartoon, boss telling his employee, you have drive, ambition and self-confidence, but what we are looking for is ability. And it's a funny way of saying you need to be able to balance your ambition, ability, X, Y, and you'll be the most valuable person in your organization if you can do that. Now, if you go to Google, for example, people who rise to the top of a Google or a Microsoft or any of these companies are actually product managers, and they go and rise. Product managers are good at the technology function, but they're not pure technologists. They're good at marketing. They're not pure marketeers. They blend these two skills. And we find in technology companies, again and again, product managers rise the fastest. In consumer marketing companies in the old days, in the PepsiCos of the world, right, the same phenomenon used to work. The product management groups used to produce the most number of CEOs. Here's another rather hilarious example. So you've got to learn to swim in the shallow end of the business and in the deep end of the business. The shallow end of the business would be trivia. What happened to the cricket match? I believe a school from Jaipur just beat Dhirubhai Ambani school in a cricket match. Fantastic. To me, you've got to be able to deal with trivia. It's there today, it'll pass, it's gone. Right? You've got to deal with more important things. Okay. Is capitalism or Marxism? Now that's a more philosophical debate. It may or may not be that important, but it's a more philosophical and deeper debate. So you've got to be able to deal with everyday trivia, which helps us to carry on with life, and existential questions of our businesses, of our lives, and so on and so forth, which is just another form of versatility. You've got to deal with E is equal to mc square, which is an engineering challenge on one day. You've got to be able to deal with control versus giving freedom to your employees, which is the capitalism versus Marxism challenge the next day. You've got to dress well so that your bum doesn't look too big or too small, as this cartoon says, and so on and so forth. And to me, we tend to get sucked into one side, either the deep end or the shallow end, and you've got to be able to swim in both the ends. And my favorite poem is the poem by Rudyard Kipling, who actually lived in Lucknow. And I think it was in Lucknow that he wrote this poem. For a while he lived in Lucknow, called If. And if you haven't read it, I would suggest all of you read this poem. And few lines: if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. So as we go through life, we go through ups and downs. And those are the triumphs and disasters. And we have to treat those two imposters, because they are short-lived, the same. That too shall pass. The glory shall pass, please be aware, and the disaster shall pass, so please be aware. And you've got to be able to move on and not get sucked in. Here's a cartoon, Gandhiji's three monkeys. We just renamed them. Hear no bad news, that's today's politics for you. Don't see any of the bad news, that's financial markets for you. Political correctness, I'm calling it religion, is don't speak ill. You've got to be able to transcend politics, finance, religion as you go through life decisions. In many businesses, politics will have a direct impact. In many businesses, politics may have an indirect impact, and let me give you an example. Bangladesh apparel export is $32 billion. India's apparel export is $16 billion. Bangladesh is the size of Haryana. 15 years ago, they started making investments in training people, education, and so on and so forth, which ended up in this. Now, if you were a person in the apparel trade 15 years ago, you've got to be able to watch what politics is doing in India or not doing in India, what they're doing in Vietnam or Bangladesh. You've got to be able to grasp the implications on your business. So I know people who preempted this, who opened plants in Bangladesh because they saw the trend, because they were able to deal with political change of Bangladesh. Most of us would be unaware. Now it's easy to know they're 32 billion, they're 16 billion. But to know it before the fact requires this kind of versatility. You've got to be versatile to be able to take risks, fail and recover. So here's a man who's building his first boat and he's writing upside down, my first boat, because he's pretty sure it will topple over one day. When it topples over, people should realize, this is my first boat. It toppled over. My next boat may or may not topple over. I'll do better. So you've got to be able to take life with this sense of humor, that there will be errors. You'll be solely responsible for some of those errors, right? And you'll still carry on. Theme number 3, you have to consciously come out of your comfort zone. And the biggest example I give, which is in the letter as well, is of Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi was a lawyer. He was not preordained to be a national leader. He was not preordained to run around in a dhoti. He was a man with a suit and a trained lawyer, British educated, and so on and so forth. But he came out of his comfort zone. It was not easy for a successful lawyer to say, I will leave my law practice and become a community organizer in South Africa, which is what he became. And then from South Africa, he moved to India. By the way, he moved to India at the age of 45 or something. So he was a late bloomer in India, but he wasn't even there. But he came out of his comfort zone and he became the father of modern India. Now here we have Herman standing in one corner in his comfort zone. We all have these corners and we all have these comfort zones, whether we realize them or not. Your spouse can absolutely point it out, what your comfort zone is and why you're not coming out of that. So please listen to your spouse. Please listen to feedback from your employees. And you've got to be able to come out of this comfort zone if you want to grow. And what is growth? If I want to grow from X to 2X, some kind of incrementalism can work. I may or may not need to come out of my comfort zone locally. But if I need to grow from X to 10X over the next 5 years or 10 years, right? I've got to be able to come out and reinvent myself every 10 years. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. The big comment is improve. That's where the big money is. So there's a book called Atomic Habits by a man called James Clear. And he gives examples from the world of sport. And he says, please improve yourself 1% every day. He just uses that, again, in a very light-hearted way. Saying small improvements every day, every month, every quarter, every year, in your business, in your personal life, accumulates to become a very large improvement 5 years later in your business. That's how you create barriers to entry and moats in your business. We tend to disregard small improvements. कि इसमें क्या बड़ी बात है, तो कोई भी कर सकता है. Then do it, but do it every single day. Now Warren Buffett said, you are right, not when others agree with you, but when your facts are right. I think one of the mistakes we make in our own businesses, in our daily lives, we confuse between anecdotes and facts. One vivid thing happening in front of us looks like an overwhelming reality, where it may or may not be an overwhelming reality. So we've got to be able to be a little bit more data oriented, a little bit more cautious, perhaps a little bit slower to reach a conclusion. So here's Guruji giving gyan to others saying, buy low, sell high. We all know this. Very few of us can actually implement this. Buying low means the mood is bad. Nobody else is buying. That's why stocks are depressed. Right? At that time, to stand out and say, I will buy this stock, when everybody around you is actually selling and saying, Baba mar gaye, requires thinking of facts, not of the mood. Similarly, to sell high when the whole world is buying, at that time to say, oh, I think this is a bubble coming, it's very difficult to stand away from that crowd. It's very, very difficult. But that's what the edge is. And I'm giving you an investment example. The same applies to your business. When do you create capacity? If you create capacity when you're nearing the peak of a boom, chances are when your capacity comes in, the boom is over. If you create capacity when you're just recovering from a trough, chances are you will be able to ride that. The oil industry knows this. They do this, the shells of the world do this every single day because they have long gestation period investments. But in our day-to-day businesses, we are often confused when to do capex. And I think that's the single biggest determinant for companies growing profitably versus not growing profitably, is capex decision discipline. Theme number 4, we must distinguish between hope and expectation. And for those who are still waiting for a big break, let us pray. Praying is not expectation, it is hope. Expectation is preparation. For those who are still waiting for a big break, let's work. That is the real answer. Now, obviously, we don't pray in a very obvious way. We pray hidden inside. We fail to take tough decisions. We somehow believe problems will take care of themselves. We somehow believe things will happen automatically. We give away the so-called agency that we have over our own lives. Right? And that slows us down. It doesn't make us change fast enough. It doesn't make our businesses grow fast enough because hope and expectation are different. Another light-hearted cartoon on that. The wild hopes and dreams reenacted by Barbie and Ken are no substitute for a solid business plan. So I would encourage you, no matter what you do, you have to be able to write down a solid business plan. You can't say, I have the plan in my head. You can't say 50% of the plan is written, there are a lot of things which you can't write down. You can actually write down everything. Writing it down actually forces you to think through the details, the implementation challenges, the contradictions that may be there that you may need to address, and so on and so forth. And I would encourage you all to write a plan. How will you go to 5x? How will you go to 10x? Even if you are not planning to go 10x in the next 5 years, it doesn't matter. It may be 15 years later. But you've got to be able to have some kind of a plan how you'll get to 10x and a more detailed plan for what you might do in the next 3 years. That is what will take your hope to a real expectation. Another cartoon. Will we double our chances of recovery if we buy 2 lottery tickets? And you won't. Okay. So there's a joke from IIT Delhi. Sardarji says, I'm sorry, I'm making fun of Sikhs over here. But Sardarji says, IIT Delhi students are obviously very smart. What's the probability there's a bomb on the plane? X. What's the probability there are 2 bombs on the plane? 1000x. So he says, I carry my own bomb. Okay. So having 2 plans is in one way good because you're thinking like a possibilist. This could happen, here's plan A. This could happen, here's plan B. But you've got to spend enough energy on making sure plan A is robust. You can't switch from plan A to plan B just like that. We tend not to make our plans very robust and hedge ourselves more often than we need to. American philosopher, and I like his statement which says, shallow men believe in luck, strong men believe in cause and effect. Okay. We know this for other people, right? I realized this for myself much later in life, right? Because it's easier to blame personal setbacks as circumstantial and somebody else's setbacks as he wasn't capable enough. I can tell you it's true for all of us. Cause and effect is right sitting with us. By the way, all these quotes are in my office, in my room. I think Uddhav has seen some of these. Now, fate is not an eagle. It creeps like a rat. So let's say something good is happening. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens slowly, slowly, slowly. And then it reaches a tipping point where we see it, my God, fantastic, it happened. Or something bad happens. It happens slowly, slowly, slowly. And then it reaches a tipping point and you say, oh my God, something bad happened. So you have to catch this rat, capitalize on this rat, accelerate this rat if you have to, or stop this rat. Here's a man getting into a taxi saying, follow that dream. So we've all got to have a dream. We've all got to have an ambition. And that ambition we may or may not realize. We may realize 70% of that ambition, 80%, 50%. But if we don't have an ambition, what are we working towards? Theme number 5. The world rewards courage more than intellect. When we are young, we think of intelligence as the key determining factor. But over time, I've realized intelligence is a given. It's no longer a USP. It's no longer the distinguishing factor between a more successful person and a less successful person. It is courage. It is a courage to take a risk. It's a courage to stand out from the crowd. It's a courage to fail. It's a courage to get up again. It's a courage to humble yourself and beg for money to a venture capitalist if that's what it takes. So, I was talking to a businessman, young guy, just day before yesterday. He is, I think 32 years old. He He built his first business, which we invested in, which was a logistics company. We were cold chain logistics company we were talking about earlier. And that didn't do particularly well, but it did well on revenue and so on. And we merged it with another company and we listed that company, and that's all done okay. He started a fintech company after that. And he would go on every sales call himself in the second company, because he wanted to make sure that the repeat of the problems of the first business didn't happen. He would go on every sales call. He just sold his company for 150 crores 2 months ago to an American company. He didn't even use the capital he drew down from venture capitalists. So he had Narayan Murthy and Lightspeed Ventures as his two investors. He didn't even use the capital. The capital is in the bank. So he learned from his first experience that he made a good business in terms of customer franchise, but weak in terms of operations. And over-engineered to such a great degree. That was the courage. So here it is. This bottle of whiskey will give you Dutch courage. Is the best you can do. So if you have to kid yourself to get courage sometimes, it's okay. If you have to be unrealistically optimistic for a while, it's okay. It's not a bad thing. As long as we think in terms of being a possibilist, it may happen, it may not happen. But you have to be optimistic, because courage will not come if you're way too realistic. Nobody in their right mind would have taken on the British Empire. But people did. If they were purely rational, they wouldn't have done it. Courage takes you a long way. Have courage, carry on. We will face this every few years when we have existential dilemmas. Bajaj Finance, I think, has already raised or is in the final stages of raising $1.2 billion at a ridiculously high valuation in this current financial NBFC crisis. They're raising $1.2 billion in a private placement. In 2008, Bajaj Finance went through an existential crisis itself. They recovered. They had the courage. They did a lot of things. They realized technology was going to hit them, or technology-focused companies were going to hit them. They invested heavily in technology. So Bajaj Finance is not a happy accident. It is a deliberate, courageous move, which we don't see today. But over 10 years, they did many things right in the face of existential dilemmas in 2008. J. Paul Getty said, "The meek shall inherit the earth, but not its mineral rights." I would say, given where we stand today, all of us, we are pretty meek. And I'll give you my grandfather's example. My grandfather came from a little town called Chidava, and he moved to Delhi. In today's day and age, that's akin from moving from Delhi to San Francisco. If somebody told me, for a business reason, will you move to San Francisco, I'll find 10 reasons not to do it. I call that, in one way, meekness. They did it. He had no background of industry. They were traders, like many people were at that time. They ventured into industry. I would say, oh, Michael Porter says core competence, this, that, and the other. Let's stay with trading, right? But it requires some amount of courage to say, I will learn something new. I will do something new. And during his peak days, he was one of the richest men in India, because he was not meek. Compared to that, all of us, in our own ways, tend to think in a meek manner. Now I have a million answers. How about a few questions? I would say we tend to spend our energy on way too many things. So it's been said, write the top 10 things that are important to you. Cancel the last 5 and focus on the first 5. Those are the important questions or the important issues. And then find the answers. Finding answers is easy. Is this question important enough? We tend to underestimate that. We study, we plan, we research, and somehow money still remains more of an art than a science. And I'll use money as a metaphor for success. Here. Success in the end is an art form. There is no formula, there is no science. And that art form is like walking a tightrope. You have to balance, you have to do various things, you have to focus. And that's what we have to do every single day because we're walking a tightrope. And as we succeed, the tightrope keeps going higher and higher. Today it's here. Can you imagine if Jio fails? What will happen to Mukesh Ambani? In his own mind. Versus Sunil Mittal starting Bharti when he did and failing at that point. He was I tried, I failed. Versus Sunil Mittal failing today or Jio failing today. So the bar keeps rising. You've got to be able to balance various things. Here's another one. Financial analysts say don't put money into one stock. It's common sense. I think we underestimate common sense. We've got to be able to carry through life, day-to-day life, with lots of common sense. I think it rewards us more than intelligence because in day-to-day problem solving, we don't need great intellect. We don't need great insight. If we know our first 5 issues well, and then we apply common sense beyond that, I think we can do wonders. It's lighter on us and we can do wonders. Theme 6. Life, I believe, is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You can have everything you want, the psychologist is telling his client, but sometimes you have to change what you want. So you've got to be able to know exactly what you want. It cannot be shaped by social expectations. It cannot be shaped by keeping up with the Joneses. You've got to know what is it that you truly want. So here's a woman going on a date. She says, I can't cook, but I can pay. I'll take you out. I'm not going to be a normal housewife. That's fine, as long as you know what it is that makes you tick. Upanishads have this great saying, and you are what your deep driving desire is. As your desire is, so is your will. As your will is, so is your deed. As your deed is, so is your destiny. This is what makes life self-fulfilling, whether we realize it or not. Here it is, a small fish waiting to be eaten or scared that it will be eaten by a big fish, who's in turn scared to be eaten by a bigger fish, and so on and so forth. And they're saying never look back. You've got to be able to understand there's risk sitting behind you no matter what you do. Whether you're a small fish or a big fish, there's risk. A startup has its own risk. A big company has its own risk. A mid-sized company will have its own risk. Market leaders will have their own risk. New entrants will have their own risk. You've got to know there's risk sitting behind you, and you've got to just swim faster. That's the only way to escape in this chain. Vonnegut is a sculptor, and he was invited by MIT to give an address to the graduating class many years ago. And he was talking about how to succeed in the long term. And he said, sometimes you're ahead, sometimes you're behind. The race is long, but in the end, it is with yourself. Are you doing something better today than you were doing it 5 years ago? It's not whether your market share went up or down. That's a byproduct of whether you're doing something better today as a person, as an organization, and so on and so forth. That will automatically happen if we are playing to be better every single day in organizations. We'll make mistakes. So here's a mistake you should make versus you shouldn't make. So one horse is telling the other. Injuries are a tricky business. Injuries meaning mistakes. Break a leg and they'll shoot you. Twist an ankle and they'll put you out to stud. So you should twist your ankle and you should become a stud. Don't break your leg, which means don't make big mistakes. You'll get shot. Small mistakes you can make every single day because you can recover. You've got to be able to distinguish the risks we can take, the mistakes we can make, so that we are put out to stud rather than being shot. You'll recover. there's one single thought that sustains me, and that is that the fundamentals are good. If you look at the world, okay, and this is not a comment on India, it's not a comment on the developed world, it's a comment, you can take it for Africa, Malaysia, anywhere. The world is a better place today than it was 15 years ago. Every metric. Those who don't believe it should read this book called Factfulness. Okay. Child mortality, infant mortality, healthcare, education, any which way you look at it. So, if the fundamentals are good and life is only cyclical, right, you have to look at the fundamental improvements rather than short-term challenges, and that keeps you going. It may also mean lever yourself less. Long-term fundamentals may be good, but short-term there may be big hiccups. Keep your leverage ratios low. Those are all implications of once you understand what the nature of your own business is, what your nature of your own ambition is, and so on and so forth. Your problems make my fee seem insignificant. Here's another psychiatrist. So you've got to be able to spend money to solve problems. Don't wish they will go away. So if you need to improve your team, for argument's sake, you've got to think whether you should change your salary scales. For example, you should question whether you need to modernize in a significant way if your productivity levels are low, and so on and so on. There is no free lunch. And those investments today, as Bangladesh has shown, will pay off 5 years, 10 years, 15 years later, depending on the nature of your business. We all tend to ask that we can do small things, tinker with small things, but have big improvements. That's not going to happen. We've got to be able to spend time and money once we identify this weekends. So, father giving advice to son, Bobby, new money is old money that got away. It talks about changes that I was mentioning earlier in the league tables. Look at the new wealth that is being created in India. I was talking to a wealth manager and she was naming an actress who I will not name, and she says her liquid net worth is 1,000 crores. Liquid net worth. Saying that this actress is so young. How can it be? It is. So there are things happening in this world. Right? We are in the age of imagination. Right? People are doing well, and we have to be able to watch what is the playground looking like and try and play in that playground. Theme number 8, ambition is right. So here are two flies on a piece of shit. And they are talking about they're happy because they have low expectations. Now this is just a very crude way of saying, if you want to be unnecessarily happy, you can have a low expectation and just be happy. So a friend of mine used to be CEO of Deutsche Bank. His name was Anshu Jain. He left a couple of years ago. And he told me one day over dinner, he says, Gaurav, your problem, meaning not my personal problem, but business community in general, he says your problem is you guys can underperform to your potential and still have a great life, because you don't need anything. You can underperform to your potential, and that's what you will be a victim of if you don't understand what is it that you can do. And I had reflected and said, you're right. We don't even challenge ourselves to reach our potential because life is so easy otherwise for us. What are your ambitions? Having less to do and more money and time to do it. This is serious stuff. We tend to clutter ourselves with too many different things. So this is just the same thing I'm repeating, which I was saying, write down the top 10 things you think are important to you and drop the bottom 5 and focus on the top 5. The most successful people I know have all the time in this world. You tell them, kal ye bahut important kaam, they'll say, sure. People who are always struggling with time, right, are people who are not well organized. They are not necessarily more productive. That's a myth. I don't know if you have seen this movie called Wall Street Threats from the 90s. And it defines greed in a very positive way. So if there is a good definition of greed, this is it. It says greed, for the lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. It works. It clarifies, cuts through and captures the essence of the evolutionary spirit. Greed in all its forms for life, money, love or knowledge has marked the upward surge of mankind. So using this definition of greed, it's good to be greedy. Greed is good. We should not say just because somebody is ambitious, right? Oh, there's some problem with this guy. Being sharp-elbowed and ambitious are two different things, by the way. Another fact of life, when you're nailing the numbers, they don't ask you any questions. So you've got to be able to perform well enough so that the mistakes that you make are forgiven by society, by your families, by your bosses, by your partners, by your distributors, or whatever it is. So if you have a good thing going and then you're experimenting alongside, almost anybody in the world will forgive the minor mistakes. Here's a man praying, and may we continue to be worthy of consuming a disproportionate share of this planet's resources. We all want that. We want a disproportionate share of the resources of this country, of this world. That's what ambition is. It's not wrong as far as I'm concerned. Here's a sports person on a television interview. It's a game of power, speed, agility and grace. But most of all, it's a game of points. In our businesses, how do we measure the points? We measure the points on how much money we make. So you've got to be able to calibrate, saying, here is my target. I will have power, speed, agility, grace, good people, this, that. But I want my profits to go from X to 1.2X. My return on capital employed to go from X to Y. My working capital to reduce from Y to X. You've got to be able to measure, because if you don't measure, you'll probably kid yourself as to what you're doing. I've heard a lot about money, and now I'd like to try some. Now let me give you a flip side of money. Money is perhaps the most overrated thing in the world. It's more interesting than anything it can buy, because it's a measurement tool. Beyond that, we've all reached a stage in our lives where it's reaching a stage of diminishing returns. More money will only add to our feeling of success. So we don't have to be cutthroat, because we can succeed without being cutthroat, without being sharp-elbowed. Theme number 9, calmness is a good tool to have. It's unfair to the little guy, but he's the easiest one to be unfair with. So never put yourself in a situation where others can take advantage of you. I hear a lot of times people saying, hey, so-and-so is taking undue advantage of me. I'm saying, okay, why are you in this situation for this long? You should have a right, you have a right to walk away. You have a right to call their bluff. Depending on your circumstance and your business, we often are too scared to make tough decisions, which is why we carry on with stressful situations. We should be able to get rid of unnecessary stress. It may set us back for 2 years, but in the long term, that's better for us. We don't tend to make those trade-offs as consciously as we ought to. Tycoon telling his subordinate, my philosophy is that the bigger you are, the smaller the desk you need. The bigger you are, actually, the smaller is your ego. So I have a friend whose father had lunch with Warren Buffett in New York at the Russian tea room. So they come out of lunch. Warren Buffett hails a cab and asks this gentleman to get into the cab. And as he's getting in, he hails a second cab for himself. I met Warren Buffett for the first time in 1989 in the New York subway. I was at Columbia University, business school, coming back. He was giving a talk at Columbia. And he was in the subway, waiting for the train. So I walked up to him because I couldn't believe it was Warren Buffett and asked him, by the way, are you Warren Buffett? And he said yes. So the bigger you are, the smaller the desk that you need. The smaller your ego. I wrote a Harvard Business School case study on Dhirubhai Ambani in 1989. So I went to meet him many times at that time. He would escort me to the elevator outside and he would stand there until the elevator door shut and fold his hands and say namaste and we are leaving. I was a 23-year-old kid. There was Dhirubhai Ambani in 1989. Man comes home. Remember how I said I was the happiest when we had nothing. So you've got to imagine that even if you have nothing, you've got to find a source of happiness. If your business makes you feel happy, or the money or the Mercedes or the holiday or whatever makes you feel happy beyond a point, there's something missing. That has to add to your happiness. It cannot be a source of happiness. Marie Curie said, nothing is to be feared, it's only to be understood. Of course, that's only an estimate. The actual cost will be somewhat more. So you've got to understand that you're not perfectly aligned with anybody in this world. Your supplier is not perfectly aligned with you. Your dealer is not perfectly aligned with you. Your employees may or may not be perfectly aligned with you because they have their own ambitions. Your brother may not be perfectly aligned with you. Your kids may not be perfectly aligned with you. So you've got to be able to carry this diverse group with you with imperfect alignment. They will tell you X, but actually what they may want is Y, which is the difference between the estimate and the actual cost. And you've got to be able to carry them. That's your job as a leader. Theme number 10, people don't see the world as it is, they see as they are. So here are two little puppies. One is telling the other, son, look out there. Do you think I got all this through luck? No, it took hard work because he believes he's a master of the universe. So we've got to be able to believe we are masters of the universe. Life in that sense is a self-fulfilling prophecy. We have to know what identity is, what a self-identity is. So here's a woman, she says, I paid so much for this dress, I'll wear it whenever the hell I want, I'll wear it to run. That's a self-identity. We've got to very carefully understand what our own self-identity is, what makes us tick. And it's about truth. So Tagore said, truth comes as a conqueror only to those who have lost the art of receiving it as a friend. If we don't understand our self-identities, if we don't see the world as it is, we're going to get humiliated in front of the world. Because the world isn't about to change. Another cartoon, what do you want? What is your bone? What makes you tick? You've got to be able to figure it out. Theme 11, if I could give my child or to myself one gift, let it be enthusiasm. Most people think of problems. Here is a problem. Here is a problem. Guess what? We are not rewarded for pointing out problems. We are rewarded for finding solutions. The difference between identifying problems and finding solutions is enthusiasm. Here's a nice thing, iPhone, therefore I am. So you've got to be able to go out, reach out to the world and find solutions. I'll give you a statistic from way back. Somebody did a study on young companies, venture capital funded companies, and they correlated in the same sector two companies, let us say. One had a higher travel budget, other had a lower travel. Companies that had higher travel budgets actually grew faster. Well, that's the nature of the beast. You want to build a business, you have to run around. You're running around more. I can see it in your travel budget. So these guys are going out, whatever the nature, and this is an industry after industry, young companies, with their peer groups in their industry. It takes a long time to become young, so said Picasso. Now, young kids are not saddled with unnecessary views. They know what they want, they carry on. We tend to get saddled with way too many complex views and thoughts. So this kid is telling Dad, today's kids don't want money, they want leadership. It's true. As you build an organization, as you're carrying your family members with you, right, money is not what solves half the problems. People think it is. You pay more, you'll get a better person. You give a ESOP, you'll get a better person. We've seen this in the real estate sector, how people used to get paid in the real estate boom. It just attracted the wrong kind of people. So you've got to be able to provide tangible leadership where people believe in your cause. Well, gentlemen, here's a problem. Cash is leaking. You've got to solve problems early. Many of us wait and watch and wait and watch. I've seen this time and time again. As an outsider, I look at it and I'm saying, hey, why? Can't you see this problem? Saying, yeah, but it's not a priority right now. I'm saying, okay. It's a 1% problem. When it becomes 5%, it will become a priority. At 3%, when does it become a priority? So, father's advice, don't complain, don't explain, and someday, son, you could be president. Point again is, don't complain, don't overanalyze, solve. Now, he's saying it in a negative way, but in the positive twist to it is, solve. Think positive. The next stock market bubble, the next business bubble for auto sales or whatever the hell it is around the corner. It's easy to get depressed by reading the newspaper. It's easy to get elated reading the newspaper. Please follow trends, not facts of that day, because the facts of that day will change. Last words. Again, Regina Brett. Don't audit life. Show up and make the most of it now. So, thank you very much.
Madhu, if you can moderate the Q&A session.
Dalmia family for generations, and we're learning about legacy. So, coming from one of the oldest families in the country for 3 generations, are there some values that have been passed on from generation to generation? Sorry. So, what are the values that have been passed on in the Dalmia family from generations?
A couple of things that stand out in my mind, and I've seen my grandparents do it, I've seen my parents do it, my uncles do it, and to a great extent in our generation, my cousins, myself, we tend to do that. One is simplicity. If I had to look at my grandfather, he was probably the simplest man I had ever met. My father in his peer group would be amongst the simple, bottom 20% simple people. And that's true for many and most of my uncles as well. What simplicity has done for them is it's kept them more real, it's kept them more focused on work and so on and so forth. So that's, I think, one thing. Second thing is hard work. Everybody in our family works hard. They all did well in school, they did well in college, they did well in work. So hard work shows at every stage of your life. 3, I think we've been very community minded as a family. So, we have good relationships in the communities that we operate in, wherever our plants are, for example. We have good relationships with our dealers and networks. So we're very ecosystem and community minded. So there's a lot of goodwill that we've tried to create in our ecosystems. So I would say these are 2 or 3 things that we've learned consciously And then unconsciously, obviously, we've inherited a lot of things, I suppose.
In terms of, your family has been associated right from the freedom times and amongst the top families, the Tatas and Birla. Can you share what has been the evolution in the family and the ethos till date, and how have you put it down to the next generation?
I keep talking about the next generation. We keep talking internally. And the challenge before all of us, by the way, is how do we keep successive generations hungry? Our parents kept us hungry, I have no idea how, but we were always kept hungry. But how do you keep successive generations hungry? And one of the things I've had open discussions with my children is, look, the world is not forgiving. So if you study evolution, if you don't adapt to the times, if you don't stay with the times, you become extinct. You can say, I'm a nice guy, I don't deserve to be extinct. Evolution doesn't ask you whether you're a nice guy or not.
Right.
Evolution says, are you adaptable or not? And therefore, if you, Mr. Big Shot, or Mr. Big Shot's son, or Mr. Big Shot's daughter, are not adaptable, the world will not forgive you. You may be forgiven as one generation, but your legacy will never get forgiven. Right? And so you've got to understand the implications of that evolution in your day-to-day life. So that's one. Number two, we tell them, please be your own person. Don't be saddled by what you have. You don't have to do what I do. You don't have to follow my views necessarily, and so on and so forth. Be your own person. Discover yourself. Make your own life. So Bill Gates has this saying. He's saying, I'm going to allow my kids to do whatever they want. But not doing anything is not an option. The risk we may have is kids can say, I can underperform to my potential, as Anshu Jain told me, and carry on. That's okay. I still eat good food, I still go on a good holiday, I still have a good life. So not doing anything is not an option.
So, essentially in family business, we all are inheritors in a way. We're inheriting from a generation, or a father or grandfather. So essentially as kids, what really shapes us or shapes them to, how you kept them hungry? I mean, if I deep dive on that, if you could share some thoughts around that.
How to keep them hungry is setting a high bar. So from start we were looking to excel in whatever we did. So will you do well in academics? You may say it doesn't matter, but that's the only race you're running, boss. Please excel. It may not matter later. Are you playing cricket? Excel. Try and excel in cricket. You may say it won't matter. No problem. Please try and excel in whatever it is that you do. So that's how you keep people hungry. If everything is chalta hai, then later in life also you have the attitude chalta hai. In more cases than not, I think that's one way to keep people. Secondly, you have to expose them to the opportunities in the world. Look at this is what is going on. This is for you to conquer. This is for you to enjoy. So you're on. You're 24 years old, 22 years old, 40 years old. Please go and conquer.
In terms of your own personal journey, have you ever had a mentor to kind of look up to? Do you have somebody that you kind of look up to?
Well, not formally, but informally, there's a gentleman who has mentored us for a long time. His name is Mr. D.N. Davar. He used to be chairman of a financial institution called IFCI, and he was the board of our company as well, and so on and so forth. And we would often go to him for advice. And it was not just advice on finances or business, but on life, on family dynamics, on everything. And he's been very, very helpful. So if I had to choose a person who's really shaped our lives, it's him.
So in a lot of Marwadi families, as young kids, you start shadowing your father and going into office. And so can you talk about your early years? How you stepped into the business, and what was the journey like in that spectrum?
So I graduated from Columbia Business School in 1990, and I joined our cement business, and I was involved in rotation through all the different areas of the cement business. But very quickly I figured my big calling was investment, so I could steer more and more towards finance and investments. So I really never shadowed anybody
Right.
per se, my father, obviously interacted with him a lot, I interacted with my uncles a lot. I never really shadowed anybody per se. And then there was nobody left to shadow as I was moving more into investments. So.
So, in terms of your journey, I'm sure you had your fair share of failures, and I think, as you said in one of the themes that you learned from your failures, can you share some of your great failures and how that let's say this issue really turned into an opportunity?
So, two themes in our failures, and I'll give you examples from investment decisions, but it could be applicable to business as well. Every failure that we've had has had one of these two common threads. One, we've made a decision saying, my God, we have to do this, otherwise we will miss something big. Under that kind of mental pressure, when we've tended to make decisions, more often than not, they've tended to be wrong. It's not that they're always wrong, but many of our decisions have had that theme, that you're under pressure, my God, you've got to do something right now. So the lesson we've learned is step away and saying, we'll see. When you have that kind of pressure, you recognize that pressure on yourself. Second is, when we're evaluating the investment or an opportunity, there are assets and there are people. I just distinguish into the two. We've been seduced by a good asset and not paid enough attention to the people, the management. And in the end, the asset has underperformed because either the management was weak or crooked or not aligned with us or whatever. So these would be two areas that we consciously watch out for going forward, because we recognize that those are our weak spots.
So in terms of your business philosophy, your investment, I've learned that you really don't invest into the internet economy. So really like an outlier in current world, all the unicorns are fintech. Or why has that been so? Is that purposeful or is that intentional? Or
in the end, you have to play in your circle of competence. Our temperament and business and investment, actually a temperament business. It's not a skill-based business. Skill only takes you to the first 50-60%. After that, I think temperament kicks in. Our temperament is pretty value-oriented. So we won't be able to deal with the volatility, the fast pace, etc., of a consumer internet business. High mortality rates, for example. And therefore, we tend to stay away. Now in India, old economy businesses actually grow very fast as well. So if you look at the consumer markets and consumer sector, you'll have many companies, if you put it in a black box, they mimic a technology company growth, even though they're not tech plays.
right.
So we are saying, let's play in a circle of competence. There's growth everywhere. Why do the high jumps over there when you can make money with low jumps over there? That's one. Two, it's not that we don't play. We tend to play by being a limited partner in funds. We are saying, you know how to play. We want exposure in that asset class. We just don't know how to play. It's not a comment on the asset class, it's a comment on us. So we are happy to be a limited partner. Having said that, technology, I believe for many years is a bubble. That bubble is unfolding today, as we can see with WeWork. Now, things that happen at WeWork may affect early stage financing in India, indirectly.
Sure.
Right? As the move slowly reverberates,
Right.
it may change. So we don't have any big issue that there's something great going on in technology, and if we miss out, we'll miss out some big opportunity. We understand this is a high volatile, high risk business, and we'll get some exposure, that's okay.
As in, when you talk about circle of competence and staying away from what you don't understand, as an entrepreneur, we have to juggle on a daily basis with a lot of aspects, and we can't really, let's say, be in a comfort zone. When I say in that sense, so companies like SpaceX and Pixar wouldn't have born if somebody stayed out of, let's say, circle of competence. So in that sense, is it not a risk appetite issue?
Everybody is built in their own way. So this is not a comment on whether technology is a good area to invest or not. That's not the comment. The comment is it a good area for us? Of course, technology is a good area to invest. If you look at the change that is happening, you look at the wealth that is being created, of course it is. By the way, we have bought a secondary in SpaceX. We have an investment in a fund called Ecom in Singapore, and they only do secondaries in the big unicorns. So they bought a ESOP stake, somebody's ESOP in SpaceX.
Right.
So we're happy to play indirectly because that suits our temperament better, or not at all because we don't get it.
Right.
And there are alternative sources of enjoying life and making money and doing everything.
So would you agree to the statement that business comes first and whatever is good for business is good for family? And if you do, then have we as a society become increasingly an outcome-based society? कि 100 crore का profit आ गया, अब ठीक है.
I would reverse it. I would say, and I've said this before, business is for the long term, family is forever. So I think family in that sense comes first. If we make compromises in the family because of the business, something's wrong in our heads. I think. Now, outcome based, you've got to understand what is your own level of satisfaction or dissatisfaction. Somebody can say, I make 100 crores a year, I'm very satisfied. Somebody can say, I make 25 crores a year and I am very satisfied. Because in terms of day-to-day lifestyle, the difference between 25 and 100 is not that much. So it is not lifestyle or any of these things that drive you. It is the feeling of success that drives you. So then at 100 you want to make 200, at 200 you want to make 400 and so on and so forth. So in that sense it's an unending game. And you may lose that ambition as you age, not because you've reached a certain number which is very satisfying, but because you say, now at this stage in my age, I don't want to keep playing this game.
Would you comment on the following analogy when you talk about greed and you talk about ambition, and how do you strike a balance between this? Is over ambition a bad thing?
What is over ambition is difficult to define, right? Ambition, over ambition in whichever way is right and okay because it's internal. If you become sharp elbowed as a result, if you become a bad counterparty as a result, because you're over ambitious, I want to somehow fool you, right? That same ambition becomes dysfunctional. And sooner or later, in my self-interest, I shouldn't do it. Not because I care about you. Because I become a bad counterparty ultimately and you stop doing business with me. So I think ambition or lack of ambition is not the issue. The way ambition gets manifested in real life is the good or the bad.
That's very interesting take. Your personal philosophy or hiring people, what do you look in the top talent that work with you? A lot of people say you need to have psychometric tests and a heat map and this and that, but I mean, let's get down to basics. How do you simplify? What does Mr. Dalmia look into talent?
So at the top level, firstly we look at people who complement us. We have X skills, we have a need gap here, we want somebody who can fill that gap in the organization. So that's the overwhelming thing, because in the end what works is the team, not the individual. Right? So we're trying to strengthen the team. Second, we look for character. In the long term, what makes people succeed is not talent, it is character. Character is like long distance running, talent is like a sprint. So that's the second thing. Third thing we look for, what are his aims and can we fulfill his aims? Is there 80% congruence, right. 75% congruence in our aims? If those three things work, right, the functional aspects of competence, they're easy to get. That's not where the challenge is. And we've had employees who worked with us 15 years, 20 years. I had an employee who was working with me who just left and has become a head of an acquisition, head of M&A at a large company. He's coming to meet me tomorrow. So we're still chatting about the state of the world and so on and so forth. So people who have worked with us, we've really enjoyed working with them. They've enjoyed working with us. And
you talked about temperament earlier on in your presentation and calmness. How does one really imbibe this whole temperament and calmness as living thing in oneself? How have you been able to do that?
I'll tell you, we've got to realize, somebody tweeted yesterday, the most important thing to understand in this world is life goes on. Once we internalize that, right, we don't get affected by day-to-day issues. So that's kind of the stuff I use at a personal level to stay sane. I don't meditate, I don't do drugs, I don't do religion. So I don't have any of those tools. But this philosophical bit,
Right.
which says life carries on, works well enough.
Last couple of questions. I'm going to open it to the floor. You in couple of the videos you talk about hope is akin to lottery, and there is an analogy between hope and expectation and courage and intellect. In today's world, I would say intellect is IP. When you talk about fintech and products, so it's really IP. So you might have the courage, but if you don't have the IP, you don't have a product. So does this change over time, or is it really agnostic toward sector to sector?
When I was talking about intellect versus courage, I was talking at a personal level. At a company level, of course, IPs work. But IP creation is not just an intellectual exercise.
Right.
Okay. You're spending money on R&D. You're playing for the long term. You're identifying segments where you want to play. You're making some big audacious bets.
Right.
Right. Those go beyond narrow definition of intellect, even though you're creating IP.
You talk about in your parenting cycle that you let your children say, you can find what you really want to do, find your happiness in what you want to do. How does one really find their true calling? Because some believe as family, it's my duty to follow my father's footsteps. This is what I have, I need to make the best of it. Sometimes we are scared to step out of a family business and pivot into something that you want to do. So how does one find their true calling?
You've got to encourage them to be their own person. You've got to let them experiment. I'll give you an example. My daughter just graduated from college in May, and she had 2 job offers. She had an offer from BCG, a consulting firm in the US, and she had an offer from McKinsey in India. Obviously, as a good Marwari father, I said, come to India and work here. She said, no, I'm making so much money in America, there is that. So we said, work in America, discover the world. Now, many parents would be more scared, oh my God, if my daughter lives in America and works in America, she may just get too Americanized, she may get an American boyfriend. I don't know what those things can run in your mind. Saying, carry on, live your life, enjoy. She's having a great time.
Typically in the family businesses, there are different, families manage their family interests in many different ways. Some are really hands-on on day-to-day business. Some are having oversight through board governance, and some just have an interest in a way that, there's a larger family holding, there's a family office, and it's being running professionally. So I think every entrepreneur wants to graduate into these stages at some point of time. Can you share, you fund a lot of businesses, and how does these businesses evolve into this, and how does the role of an entrepreneur change in these 3 different pedestals?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So, as a business entrepreneur, when you start a business, you're on a day-to-day basis running the business. As you grow bigger, you probably step out and get into a board level, and you have a governance tool to kind of look at the handle of the business. And furthermore, then when you grow really big, you say, I have my interest, I'm not into day-to-day, and a family office is managing this. So you graduate. So how is this functioning? And you funded so many businesses. How do you see this change as an entrepreneur for his own journey?
There is no formula per se. So different people have different interests, different capabilities, businesses evolve in a different way, and so on and so forth. So most businesses that we invest in, we invest behind a team, not behind a person. So let's say you're the entrepreneur, founder, legacy owner, and you have a team. So we are investing behind that team. And we have to have very clear conversation as to what your needs are. So for example, you may need a dividend policy to support your family. We want to know it today. How much income do you need? Please don't steal from the business. Tell me, I want so much salary. It's more tax efficient to come through dividends, so please give me this much dividend, give me this much salary, whatever it is. So that's one kind of thing. So we want you to be there in the long run. If you have more than one business, then we want to know how much time are you spending. Where does the buck stop? Here, in this business, because you have more than one business, and so on and so forth. If you have family members, whether you have a nephew in the business, son in the business, what are the rights of that nephew, son, brother, father, and so on and so forth. So that's the day-to-day stuff that we want complete clarity. Then we want to know how do you wish to evolve. We are investing with a 5 to 10 year view. Where do you stand, Mr. Entrepreneur? Do you wish to carry on another 10 years doing this? Do you want to do something else, slowly phase out over the next 3 years.
Right.
Right? In which case I want to know who replaces you. So these are not difficult if you can address them head on. Because the world evolves, people evolve. We don't believe in a static world. We are happy to deal with all the moving parts as long as we know that these are the moving parts.
My last question is, a visionary is called an achiever after the world knows his achievements in hindsight. But in the act, between this transition, some call them illusionary. अरे तुम तो पागल हो गए हो, क्या कर रहे हो? So how does the entrepreneur who has this vision and is transition, how does it bridge this thing for gaining self-confidence? As you said, you sometimes have mental block that nahi main acha nahi kar raha hu, but surroundings kind of bring you up. Your bringing up brings you up. So how does an entrepreneur fight this journey while he's building his business, has a vision, and while his business is not really accumulated into the achievement, but
during phases of that type where you still have a dream but you've not achieved that dream, you're maybe having hiccups along the way, you've got to believe in yourself. You've got to believe that you can pivot. So let's say you thought this market was this size, right? And in venture world, pivoting is a very often used concept. You may say this is not quite working, but if I did this, it could work. So there is a lot of trial, error, experimentation. If that wasn't the case, there would be no opportunity. Right? So we respect all that and we support entrepreneurs in doing it. Now, if you are very externally directed, oh, someone mocked me because my first venture is underperforming. I'm saying, in the end, the race is with yourself. And it's a long-term race. 3 years later, if somebody says, oh, your business is underperforming, it's okay.
thank you so much for addressing these questions. We are open to the floor, so I'm going to pass on the mic. So, gentlemen. Yes, ma'am.
As a leader, depending on the context, obviously, you've got to be able to shape expectations of your constituents. Your constituents could be countrymen, if you're Prime Minister of India type. They could be employees, if you're owner of a business. It could be family members, if you're a family business, and so on and so forth. You've got to be able to shape expectations of your constituents, number one. Number two, you've got to be able to understand the needs of the different people and fulfill those needs to 70% satisfaction, 60% satisfaction. Right. Third, you've got to be able to stretch them and say, look, you are capable of more. I can help you do more. I can see it. I'm wise because I'm a little far away, not because I'm inherently wise. You're in the day-to-day spot. I'm slightly away. I can see you can do better. So you can stretch them. When you put all these things together, you become a leader in their mind. You become a mentor to them or a leader to a group or whatever it is. And to me, that leadership is day-to-day stuff. It's not rhetoric. It's not giving gyan. Right? Where is this day-to-day stuff?
So, quick question. When did your table get smaller since you began with your team? When did you get a little more time to kind of everything? And secondly, I've been following this philosopher, author, Yuval Noah Harari, who talks about how happiness is overrated. It's more like reality minus expectation. And lack of happiness actually leads to more ambition. So I want your thoughts on both of these things.
I don't know how big or small my table is. Depending on the day, sometimes I feel I'm calm and my ego is away. Sometimes I feel I'm getting too egotistical. So it depends on the day. So I don't know, my table keeps going bigger and smaller every day. In terms of happiness, I think it is true that a certain amount of dissatisfaction creates drive. And that drive leads to success. But I don't know whether dissatisfaction and happiness are necessarily the same thing. I could be happy, but I could be dissatisfied in that I want more. Not that I'm unhappy. I think here is another big opportunity I can conquer. That doesn't mean I'm unhappy. But I do agree that certain amount of dissatisfaction is required to propel.
What would you consider your biggest failure in your career so far, and what would be the lessons you learned from it?
We've had so many failures now. Where to answer?
The biggest.
I think my personal biggest failure would be we have not caught certain opportunities in investing that would have taken us to a different level. For various reasons. Either we were not bold enough at that time, we were not adequately prepared at that time, so various reasons. So I would say that would be the single biggest failure. In terms of day-to-day business, I don't think there are any big failures, very small setback here, small setback there, but nothing strategic in nature. In terms of our teams, family, this, that, I think we've carried them well. So I would say this is it.
What's the sector that's caught your eye for investment?
I keep telling people in India, there are opportunities everywhere. Metro businesses in the Western world, automotive, this, that and the other, are actually fast growing businesses in India just because the nature of the stage of our development. We all have our sweet spots, and we have two sweet spots. In private equity, our sweet spots are financials. We think they're a great way to make money, and consumer proxies. Consumer we find too expensive, so consumer proxies. So we tend to play in those two areas. Within financials, we've done a lot of NBFC bets. We were in India Bulls in 99 or 2000. We made 50x our investment. We are in 3 private NBFCs right now, and all are doing actually quite well even in this downturn. We're in one fintech company right now. We have a bunch of public listed NBFC investments. So that's a space we understand, we can react quickly, and so on and so forth. On the other side, we like structured credit in real estate as a sweet spot as well. There's a lot of blood on the street in that industry, on that segment. But if we do that smartly enough, I think on a risk-adjusted basis, we can make very good returns. So these are two kind of things that we tend to focus on. Everything else we tend to do more opportunistically.
Good evening, sir. Sir, where does the family legacy stands in the current scenario in India? A simple question what I want to ask. The family has 10 companies and 2 of them are doing bad, 8 are doing very well. But 2 of them which are doing very bad, they're not even paying their vendors on time. It's a very straight question. But where does the family legacy is going in the current scenario in India?
I don't know if there's a macro answer to this, but the answer would be your family legacy is going where you take it. Let's assume I have these 10 businesses, right? 2 are doing badly, 2 are doing very well, 6 are doing okay, or whatever. It's my job, if I'm the leader of that family, to steer the bad businesses into better. Or if they are not steerable in that sense, dispose them off. If my nephew runs it and I have to convince my nephew, Baba, let's sell it. So I think it's so circumstantial, you can't really answer that. And I would say the second point I would make is the legacy of a family is not the legacy of your business. It is beyond that. The legacy I want to leave, for example, with my kids, are they happy? Are they achieving? They need not be in the so-called family business. Bill Gates doesn't run a family business. He still needs a legacy for his family, So we have to segregate business and family in that respect, I would say.
Thank you, Gaurav, for an amazing session. I mean, all of us